Please know that what you're saying is going to be on Facebook. All right. And well, then let's just proceed. Yeah. All right. So last week, as I was saying last week, we took the time to begin to identify. Well, as the topic is, the topic is on what is a new covenant. The reason why this is just to give a little recap of what we covered last week, but also to give context as to the reason. The reason why we found that this question was so pertinent is exactly because of everything that we mentioned last week, where we have attributed a lot of traditional upbringings and traditional education and traditional installation of cultures of Christianity into our personal lives. And this has actually led to, as most of you know here today, at least statistically, at least 3,000 denominations under the umbrella of Christianity. And when we hear 3,000 denominations under the umbrella of Christianity, and there is one name of God in the Bible, that should be cause for alarm, and it should also be cause for questioning as to which one of those 3,000 denominational perspectives am I holding to, and even more so, is the perspective that I have, is it objective? Is it yielding fruit? Am I actually reproducing what the Bible says I should reproduce? Is what I'm thinking or what I believe, or is what I was taught yielding the fruit of the Spirit? Is it yielding joy, peace, love? Are you living in a zone where you're at peace, where there is no condemnation? Or are you in an area where there is condemnation and you feel depressed, you feel inadequate, and a lot of issues related to mental health? For us to have 3,000 denominations in Christianity, just hearing that, I think most of us have actually become so desensitized to the fact that we have 3,000 denominations that we hear that and we might say, okay, interesting, or wow, and we walk away thinking, well, according to what I was told, my pastor said that what we said, that our denomination is the truth. I'm sure some of us have heard that at some point in time. And where we're living in a society and an era or a civilization where there is one Yeshua with one name that he discipled in, the same name he transmitted to the disciples, and the same name the disciples discipled in. They taught this name. We do not see in the Bible where amongst Jesus and his disciples and his 70 disciples and the 500 that was following him, we do not see amongst them 500 different perspectives. All of them are recorded as having one. And therefore, we may have found ourselves in a position where we have been desensitized by what we hear by turning on Christian television and hearing one perspective here, the other perspective here, one perspective across on the other side, other perspective across on the other side, and everyone expressing different criteria, different different rules of validation, because that is exactly what you are hearing. 3,000 denominations means 3,000 rules of validation, or 3,000 constructs of rules of validation. Now, hearing it in the way that I'm communicating it to you, what comes to your mind? What actually comes to your mind when you hear that? 3,000 different constructs of rules of validation. What comes to mind?
One word: confusion.
Confusion, yeah, it's confusion. And that also means that if by chance 1 out of these 3,000 happens to be correct, that's 2,999 denominations that believe that they're following God and will die a terrible death, one with mental health issues, as well as be taken out by sickness or by death. The same thing that Yeshua came to free mankind from the fear of. Do you understand? Does that register as to how serious this is? You can feel free to comment in the comment section, by the way, if you don't want to unmute, so we know that you're following. Right? So, all right, everybody else, is that making sense? Now, what I'm saying here, for those of us here now on the live, and for those following on Facebook, this is in no form or fashion an attempt to frighten you or to scare you into condemnation. But we would be fools ourselves to not question, where do we stand in all of this? Right? Because if we have 3,000 denominations, we could very well be under, from what we were taught, not we here at the Institute, but from what we were taught, we could have been educated in perspectives that's 1 out of 3,000, a 1 out of 3,000 ratio, that what we knew or what we were taught was the actual truth. Even if you are gambling, that's terrible proportions right there. That's depressing proportions. That's a depressing ratio. 1 out of 3,000 chance that what you had been taught is actually true. Right? And so I want to use that as the introduction to our Bible Roundtable meeting here today. All right, so for everyone joining us on Facebook, and everybody here on Zoom already knows me. But for those of you joining on Facebook and hearing this for the first time, my name is Zine, as you see written on your screen, and this is the Bible Roundtable, where we have decided at the International Institute of Pneumatology to begin to address the hard questions, to begin to address the questions that we should ask, to begin to address the questions that is impacting your life and probably keeping you in a state of confusion, a state of condemnation, a state of mental health issues, a state of physical ill health. This is not what the Bible speaks about, and if we do not ask these questions, then we ourselves may have been pulled along the track of the rat race and being led to think that what we are saying is, being led to think that what we believe is true, and everything around us is screaming at us and saying something is wrong. So this Bible Roundtable is designed to address the hard questions and to actually open up the floor and open up create an atmosphere where we're not doing a live per se, where we're just speaking and taking comments, but open up, create an atmosphere where everybody has equal chance to ask a question, to voice a concern. And the objective of this roundtable is at the end of our session that clarity has been come to. We have arrived at an understanding, and an understanding that is actually contextual to the scriptures or to the Bible that you have in your hands. And so all of the information, as I mentioned before, all of the information that we have here, because of these hard questions, the International Institute of Pneumatology was actually born in 2015 and 2016. Eventually, we were able to, I started the pursuit of really understanding what was true. And for those of you who heard my story, you will understand what that was like. But basically, the International Institute of Pneumatology was birthed out of the question, why isn't the Bible working for the believers today? Why aren't we seeing what we are reading in the Bible? And what is the spirit that everybody is speaking about? Everybody says that they have, everybody is actually judging others on. And how does that spirit work? And if the Holy Spirit in particular is the spirit of all spirits, then if we do not understand what the spirit is and how the spirit works, then we are clueless with regards to the spiritual realm that everybody seems to be running around afraid of and chasing their tails. Like a dog running around in a circle, chasing his tail, not being able to lay hold on it, right? And of course, finally, this Bible Roundtable is not only designed to ask the hard questions, but it is the atmosphere or the forum that I will be a little more blunt than usual, because we have too many saints and believers that desire God with a sincere heart, and doctrines with nice, colorful, pretty sprinkles have been tossed on the doctrines, and it looks so pretty, but it is actually darkness. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah, I love your bluntness. I'm glad to hear that, Holy Sister, because many people are offended by it. As a matter of fact, generally, the only those that I really coach one-on-one, like Coach Courtney here, Tanya, they know how blunt I am. And the public doesn't really get to see that side of me. I am usually very tempered, and I stay within principles. But when it comes to walking in light, I do not hold my reins on actually identifying what is light and darkness, and identifying where decisions must be made, or else we find ourselves embracing darkness and suffering ourselves whilst we are actually giving others doctrines and perspectives that are actually dysfunctional and disadvantageous to them. All right. So in this forum, I'll be a little more blunt than usual. And I trust that everyone understands that it is in no form or fashion an attempt to diminish what we have been taught, but to actually bring to our light that these are things that have been actually held us by our necks at a disadvantage in suffering. And many of us here, if you are actually here listening to this, it's because you want to know the truth. It's because your heart has driven you here. You have a desire in your heart to know what to do and how to do it. And so in no form or fashion am I here to actually diminish your perspectives or diminish what you've experienced or diminish what you're educated on, but to actually be very blunt so that you can walk away here knowing whether this works or it doesn't work. So having said all of that, let's dive in here to bring it on. All right. So the first thing I actually want to do here tonight, I want to do two things. All right. Now, I'm not too sure if I'll be able to fully accomplish both. And if we are not able to accomplish it, we will continue next week. But the first thing I want to do is actually identify what is our present understanding of relationship in our society today. And now, the reason why I'm actually starting on this note, I'm going to start on this note. And then the second thing I'm going to start with is what we have been taught, the dynamics that we have been taught with regards to what it means to know God and to walk with God, and what the dynamics of that relationship generally looks like. Now, this would vary depending on the denomination that you were educated through, but the generalities pretty much apply to all 3,000, right? So the first thing that we want to actually speak about here tonight is what a relationship is. And then I will get into the dynamics that we were taught. And number three will be number three. So number one, let me just put this in point form here. Number one would be what a relationship is in our culture. Number two would be what is the dynamics that we have been taught concerning, general dynamics we've been taught concerning interfacing with God. Number three, we would go back to the Old Covenant to see what the Old Covenant was, because what we have been doing in our culture today, if you have not been awakened to this as yet, what we have been doing in our culture, is we have generally taken the Bible, use it as rules, some divine law that fell from heaven for all of humanity, and use it as a whip and as a rule of validation. And the Bible in itself will prove all of these 3,000 denominations to be misguided in some form or fashion, because what we are being taught and that has come from the Bible is not what is in the Bible. And finally, we will take a look at what the Old Covenant looked like, what that contract was, how it was structured, how it began, and then we read it to the New Covenant so you can see clearly what the New Covenant is and actually begin to walk in the covenant and see results in that. And I just want to put out here that for most of us, the reason why we're not seeing results is because we have been actually taught a dynamic of relationship that we've attributed to God that has us actually hitting and missing the mark, so that we are actually not being able to we do not find ourselves in a position of security that actually allows us to benefit from the dynamics of our own spirit. So, what is a relationship? Now, before just to give everybody context, just to give everybody an opportunity here, what in your minds, what have you been taught a relationship is? Now, when I say relationship, I'm not only speaking about relationship with God. And the reason for that is our research at the International Institute of Pneumatology indicates that our spirit, one energy, and therefore it is one mind. And even though we have been educated in some aspects of our society to think that we can have more than one standard or one principle functioning in our spirit, I've said this many times, that the research has actually revealed that what an engine is to a vehicle, logic is to spirit. And each logic that everyone adopts is functioning by a particular principle or a rule, a law that they're using, or something that they're using as a law to be able to formulate thoughts, to justify thoughts that they're actually formulating. And therefore, even though we may think that we can multitask, even though we think that we can have opinions based on two different points of reference, we tend to deceive ourselves, because the spirit being one spirit, one mind, can only hold one principle. It can dabble in other principles, but generally it is only using one principle to be able to know how to make decisions. And so the reason why I'm saying this is because whatever you think God is, and whatever your relationship with God is, whatever you identify as your relationship with God, is the dynamic that you have been using in your relationships with people, in your marriages, in your romantic relationships, in your family relationships, your friendships, and so on. It's one dynamic that you're using, and the same results or lack of results that you're getting in your relationship with God is the same thing that you're getting in these other relationships, but you have not been able to place your hand on what is actually causing all of this dysfunction in all of these relationships. Does this make sense so far? Or have I saturated you with too much information there? All right, so I see yes, we've seen 2 yeses there. So in this case, what no, I'm just looking for at least 1 or 2 contributions here. If you have to define a relationship right now, how would you define it? You can write in the comments. You can even unmute for those of us on Zoom. If you were supposed to define a relationship right now, how would you define it? Agreement, all right? Well, Coach Courtney's master mentor, so. Anybody else? How many of us here in agreement here? Okay, I think of the word connection, how we connect with each other. No, that right there is a little bit closer to what most of us are taught. So this is exactly where we're going. And I'm saying this because what we have actually come to understand a relationship is, in our culture today, in our society today, you may be surprised to know that the relationship, that the general understanding of how a relationship is formed looks something like this. John meets Mary. John and Mary see each other and they seem to like each other. They have a fondness for each other. And so John sees Mary. He says to himself, I like Mary. Mary may have some sort of fondness for him too. And so John musters up the courage and he wants to Mary and say, Mary, would you like to go for ice cream? After a conversation, so would you like to go for ice cream? And Mary says, yes, of course, I'd love to join you. And they then proceed for the day that they actually set to go for ice cream. Now, usually before the actual date, John and Mary would usually be thinking about what this date would look like. And for most of us in our society, what we understand a relationship to be is actually or I shouldn't say what we understand, or what we have imagined a relationship should be is usually cultured by Hollywood, by romantic novels, by your familial circles, by basically something external. Something is either environment, your family, movies, and we know many of us here, we like to watch the romantic movies, the romantic comedies, movies like The Notebook, and we may have read books, or some of us actually we like soap operas, right? And so whilst John and Mary actually waiting for this date, how someone can benefit me, how I can benefit them. Right. So John and Mary would usually be, before the actual date, they would have already begun to run the movie of what this relationship is going to look like. Mary would sit there and she thinks, John is going to open a door for me. And she begins to have her heart feel warm and fluttery because she's seeing John opening the door for her, and John speaking to her and sharing, professing his fondness for her. And he speaks with a particular tone. And Mary then begins to attribute what went on in the last movie. Right? Mary then begins to think about The Notebook and how in a notebook they were walking down the road and they were playing with the ice cream. And so Mary thinks, I wonder if John likes to play with ice cream because she wants to experience what she saw in the movie in the notebook. And John then thinks about, I wonder if Mary would be attractive, would she be cute on this date? Would I want to see her again? She's hoping, well, John likes cars. She likes, I wonder if I turn up with my flashy car, with my Mustang, if Mary would actually be attracted to me. And she likes, John saw the movie Fast and Furious and he saw Letty and Toretto. So he wants to turn up and he's turned up looking like Toretto to pick up Letty in his mind. The song familiar so far? All right. So far, with what I've said so far, what you may not have been taught and what we have not been taught in our culture is that what we have there is two different frameworks of relationship working, two different dynamics, two different reference points, and therefore the two reference points have two different expectations, two different construct of expectations. Smell disappointment coming. Yeah, it coming real hard and real fast. So they get to the date. Now, by the way, before the date, John has already, based on his movie with Toretto and Letty, he has already begun to generate feelings for Mary, because Mary looks sexy, Mary looks attractive, Mary smells good, and Mary looks like a Letty. In John's mind, that's Letty. And John is already beginning to feel butterflies. And Mary, before even the date starts, she's thinking about walking on the road and playing with the ice cream. And she begins to see, she finds that John smells good and John looks good behind the steering wheel. And John may be working out in the gym, so John's shoulders look kind of broad, back looking a little broad. So yeah, she feels like that's the man for her. And so expectations are actually being built, but not only because of the expectations, what we have are feelings that are being generated. And so the date finally takes place, and expectations are high. And the first date went well. They had a conversation and they don't know where, they're still unsure with each other. So they're testing to see how it goes. And the first date went well. And after the date, they left. And now Mary comes back home and she says she has found her new love. She's in love. And she's happy and she's in her room and she's happy and she's on the bed and she's writing about this, and she's texting her friends and says she met John, and John is this cute guy and all of that. And so she's generating emotions, and now in her mind there's something building there. And John, he thinks about this relationship and he says, well, she looks all right, and she didn't turn out to be the Letty that I was looking for, but I might be interested in having a second date. Right? Mary is saying, yes, Mary didn't even ask John as yet. She's telling her friends, yes, we're going on another date and it will be awesome. And John is there saying, yeah, she's awesome, but not the Letty I'm looking for, but I would be interested in going out on another date. And this continues. We have one date after the next. And so what we have is Mary. In Mary's mind, a relationship is building. John is still probably not too sure. Yeah. And because he isn't too sure, he's moving. He could be there with her, he's going out with her, and she's actually building a relationship in her mind. And then one day, John goes and he sees her next a next woman. And this woman name's Jennifer. And Jennifer looking like a little more like Letty. So John passed and he takes, try to flirt with Jennifer, but nothing serious, nothing takes place, and they're gone. And then Mary now begins to amp it up because Mary wants John, because John is fitting the narrative. And so she's now increasing her feelings to John. And she begins to do more based on the notebook to get John's attention. And this goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And this actually becomes eventually what we have is some brick walls coming at you. Do you know why this is the common narrative? Is this the common narrative? Yes or no? Write in the comment section. Is this the common narrative? Yes. So we have one yes. I've been there. Yes. The reason for this, the reason why this is the common narrative is because the construct of a relationship that we have been taught in our westernized culture, that you have learned by seeing and copying, whether on movies, books, in your family, amongst your friends, in your environment, in your demographic, wherever you got the construct, you learned it by experience. Not many of us can say that someone sat us down and taught us what a relationship should look like. And so we came into the construct. We started to use it. We saw everybody using it. But nobody stopped to question if this is actually how a relationship works. We assume that this is how a relationship works. And believe it or not, this is where the bomb drops. Do you know that by definition, and I will show you this so that you cannot say Zane is just making this up. I'm going to share my screen here. And I'm going to take it to the dictionary so that you all can see for yourselves that Zane is not making this up. Do you know that the definition, let's share my screen here now. Do you know that the definition of that we've been taught in our culture is not relationship? For those on Facebook, for those on Zoom, do you know that the definition that you were taught of relationship is not relationship? It actually falls on the definition of attachment. Right? Which is, what we apply is affectionate regard. That's what we're actually applying. But everybody taught us that what we're doing is that we're building a relationship. A strong emotional bond is another one. But in this case, that an infant formed from a caregiver, such as mother, especially. All right, when viewed as, all right, so we're not going to look at that one. Right? Let's see, let me just scroll down. Right? By definition, look at right here. Definitions for attachments. Strong feelings of affection or loyalty for someone or something. This is exactly what we're experiencing. And because you were taught without verification that it's a relationship, you assumed that what you're doing here is building a relationship. Jaw drop moment. Is everybody seeing this? If you're seeing that, type seeing it. If you're seeing this, type seeing it. Strong feelings of affection for someone or something. This is actually what you think and you were taught a relationship is. And you were taught that this is how you build a relationship. You have these strong feelings and you begin to work harder to get the person to recognize your feelings and to reciprocate these feelings. Most importantly, you're taught that the person is supposed to, well, most people end up working harder to get it, to try to invigorate this person or to inspire this person to reciprocate their strong feelings of affection or loyalty for them. And you were taught that that's how a relationship works. What you literally have been taught to do is really to actually just emotionally attach to somebody else. I can even take it further. The dynamic that we have been taught, my goodness, reminds me of some parasitic relation. Yeah. And I'll start. Watch this. So some of us actually taught that when you do this, you say that you're falling in love. Let me show you what you have been caught falling in love falls under in the dictionary. Someone or something that a person thinks about constantly or frequently. Watch the definition it falls under. Obsession. You have been taught that this is what it means to fall in love. Another jaw drop moment. Take your time and take a breath. You've also been taught an activity that someone is very interested in or spends a lot of time doing. That's why you want to spend time with the person. You're taught that is how you build a relationship. This is what it is actually on the dictionary, an obsession. Now, let me pause right here. Because this right here is exactly how you are taught to build a relationship. To spend a lot of time doing something with the person, an activity, or going to an event, or going to cinema. You want to go all of these things, you do all of these things. You spend a lot of time with the person. You can't stop messaging them. You can't stop thinking about them. Someone or something that a person thinks about constantly or frequently. What you really have been taught is how to be obsessive. And you were taught that that's what a relationship is. Let me pause right here. How many of us here, this segment right here is actually hitting you straight in the middle of your forehead? Feel free to comment or even unmute and just share your thoughts. How does that register on your mind right now? Hitting me in the feels. This is so true. Yeah, that was in the past. Yeah. That is the dynamic that you're being taught as to what how a relationship works. You apply it to your friendships. You apply it to your romantic relationships. It's the literal formula that you have been applying to your romantic relationships, your marriages, your any type of relationship that involves your now please note that this is not for condemnation, right? We just being objective and blunt so that we understand, because I'm not going to sugarcoat it and you walk away thinking that everything is all right and you walk away in dysfunction. So this is actually just to bring enlightenment so that we can identify, because what we cannot identify, we cannot invalidate to begin the process of educating towards reorientation. Now, this is the dynamic that you've been applying to your relationships. There are many believers today that is saying in the name of Jesus. And this right here is exactly what they believe building a relationship is. Spending a lot of time doing something. That's why you have been taught to pray regularly. You have to spend time to build a relationship with God. You need to pray more to build a relationship with God. You need to read your Bible. You need to spend time in the secret place, quote unquote, the secret place to build a relationship with God. What you've really been taught to do is obsess about your idea of God. It is in no form or fashion functional. You're not talking about prayer closet. You're talking about going in your secret place and spend time in your room and pray for hours. You need to fast. You need to spend time either reading the Bible or listening to sermons. All of these things that you're doing have context in the Bible that you have never been taught what they're for and how they benefit your spirituality. You've been taught to use it as an activity that you are actually using to spend a lot of time to build a relationship with God according to your definition of what God is. This right here is you obsessing with God. Let me make it very clear. You do not have, nor do you even understand using this dynamic what a relationship is, much less to have a relationship with God. All you're doing is trying to spend time because you're obsessing about the idea of having a connection with God. Is this making sense so far? And it's because of that, you're spending time in prayer, you're fasting, you're praying, you're suffering from mental health issues, and you're doing more of the same thing, hoping that it will free you from all of your mental health issues. You're doing more of the same thing, hoping that God will reveal himself and manifest. And you'll have see supernatural happenings, and you're questioning, why is it not happening? Why am I still experiencing this? Why do I feel so sad? Why am I not enough for God? The only reason you've been thinking that you're not enough of God is because this is the dynamic that you were taught that you needed to use to build a relationship with God. And so you're doing more, trusting and praying that at some point it will be enough for God to reciprocate your feelings, your desires, and reciprocate all of the emotions that you are attached to your definition of God. And for some of us, we have gotten depressed. We've gotten dejected. We felt dejected. We felt rejected by God because he's not responding. He's not reciprocating. You feel inadequate, yes. You feel great sense of inadequacy. You feel like you're a sinner and you're dirty and you need to do more. And anytime somebody talks about conversation about relationship with God, you feel like you're not worthy to be in this conversation because God does not speak to you. And that's all based on this one dynamic that is in fact obsession. You do not have a relationship. What you have is a movie of a relationship that you have in your mind based on the happenings that you see of God in the Bible. And you are using the dynamic of obsession to get you there. And for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of your life, you're doing the same thing over and over, and it is not working, but you can't understand why. It's because you have been obsessed about the idea that you have built about God, and unfortunately, the denominations that we have come from fed it. And now I'm not saying any form of action that they did it wickedly, but it is the best that the denomination knew. And they fed it, and you grew, and you continued to grow. And on top of that, because that's the dynamic that you were taught to have a relationship with God, is the dynamic that you've been applying to your marriages, to your relationships, to your friends, to your family members. And just as the relationship with God seems dysfunctional, but you don't want to admit it, you're fearful to even entertain the idea that God has rejected you. When your husband or your wife does it, or your boyfriend or your girlfriend doesn't actually respond in the same way, it's the same wicked cycle that's actually taking place over and over and over again. Yes, Shelley, that is exactly why people end up turning to suicide. Because they've gotten to the point where nothing works. And to them, based on what they were taught, God interfaces with those who are righteous. And therefore, they are going to the end and lengths to do something. And God is still not responding to them. So to them, why live if God is not speaking to me? If God himself, who is the creator of all, does not even respond to me, I have no hope. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me on Facebook, holy siblings joining me on Zoom, you have been misguided. You have been duped. And tonight, I trust that this hits you in your face hard enough to know that you need to stop and decide that this stops and ends now. Is this making sense so far? Is this making sense? Right now, because of this, you have been opening the book that is supposed to educate you on your spiritual functionality. And instead of using it for spiritual function, you've been using it, reading it, searching what more you need to do to get God to acknowledge you. Does that sound familiar to anybody here? Therefore, what you've been using the Bible to do is to seek out your emotional and moral validation so that you can feel accepted, which is why the majority, and I'm going to be very blunt, this is why the majority of believers on Facebook are obsessed with God loves me. And you need to show love. Why? Because they lack the security of God's love. And so the only way to get themselves into some place of sanity is to actually obsess about God's love for them, whilst they still have a dysfunctional dynamic and they cannot walk in power, nor can they walk and heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out devils, or even actually bring people into the fruit of the Spirit. What people are actually looking for are branches so that they do not fall into the pit and the bottomless pit of the fact that they have no security in what they're doing. And so you open the Bible and using it as a compass of emotional validation and moral validation so that you can actually gain some sort of self-security in your process. Is this making sense? Take your time. And I want you to think about it, digest it, because it can stop now. But this dynamic that you were taught has to be abandoned. Do you know that this dynamic of relationship that what I'm referring to here exists in the social culture of our relationship, of our society, but does not in any form of fashion, or is not in any form of fashion referenced in aspects of our society that actually work with the true definition of relationship. That's the legal field and the business field. They work with the definition of relationship that is the actual definition. Our entire social construct in our westernized community is based on the principle of obsession. So let me ask you a question, Anna. If it's not working with God and you, will it work in your actual relationships? Yes or no? And even so, if it is not working in your actual relationships, do you think it will work spiritually with God? Definitely no. Here's another question. Here's another question. If this dynamic is a dynamic that that actually has you seeking emotional validation, which is really what you're looking for, is approval from God, or moral validation for God to actually watch you and be and accept you as someone He wants to be around. Do you think that that dynamic is going to benefit your relationships? Yes or no? Would it benefit your marriage? Yes or no? Will it benefit your friendships? Because the truth of the matter is, what you're really doing is actually hunting for a slave to work towards your emotional validation and moral validation. You're not looking for a partner, you're looking for a slave that would take on the unspoken responsibility of emotionally validating you and morally validating you. What you're also doing is not having a relationship. You are using the people that you're actually in a relationship with for your self-benefit. A moment of silence. Does this make sense? For how many of us here just heard that statement and it hits you in your forehead again? If this is dynamic that you've been taught, we were taught to use people for self-benefit, for the benefit of our own emotional validation, as well as for the benefit of our, depending on what it is, our moral validation. Therefore, what we've been trying to do, what we were taught to do, is to use God to emotionally validate us, as well as to morally validate us. The next question I'll ask you is, if you're using God, are you having a relationship? Or are you trying to enslave God based on the dynamics of obsession? And are you functioning? Are you functioning? Or are you obsessed with the pursuit of your moral and emotional validation? Which one is it? Relationship or obsessive pursuit? Write it in the comments. Relationship or obsessive pursuit? Which one is it? Relationship or obsessive pursuit? Which one is it? Obsessive pursuit. Now, this is why we had been frustrated, and I have come out from a Pentecostal system. I'm not afraid to say that I was a Pentecostal for 15 active years of my life. And I was in that pursuit daily. I was one of those that actually did it 8 and 10 hours a day of praying and fasting, thinking I'm building a relationship with God. As a matter of fact, and we both have in progression of, yes, of course. But what we're saying is that we need to identify the dynamic to completely eliminate it. If you never identified it, you could be caught in between two dynamics and you're more confused. Does that make sense? You cannot eliminate what has not been identified. With specificity, that is. So I, in particular, let me express something here that not many people publicly know about me, right? One of the things that I did as a Pentecostal, in my Pentecostal era of my life, in this pursuit, was that I, in my teenage life, wanted to actually experience God like Moses and Elijah and all of these guys. And here's something that you don't know about me. Some of you here don't know about me. In my teenage years, I reasoned to myself that I was not enough for God to actually interface with me. And so I went in the Bible and I pulled out every single character that I knew of that had an actual interface with God, from Moses right back to Jesus. It was Daniel, King Solomon, King David, Joseph, Abraham, all of these guys. I pulled them out. And you know what I did? I went and I studied each and every one of these guys. I went into their history and I found every single thing that they were involved in. I found what they studied. I found what they were involved in. I found how they were physically built. And I went in a list and I began to study everything that these guys began to study. In my pursuit of getting to a place that God will find me worthy of visiting. I started with Abraham. Abraham, by the way, is actually, according to history, is responsible for the introduction of astronomy to Egypt. So I studied astronomy. I studied everything that Abraham studied. I studied everything that Joseph studied. I studied everything that Moses studied. Well, to a point, because Moses actually understood and excelled at military science before he left Egypt. That aspect I didn't really get into, but I actually studied books that taught me the art of war, starting with the book called The Art of War. And I studied all of these guys. Then I saw that these guys were physically built. They were warriors, so I studied Chinese martial arts. They were built. I got involved in bodybuilding. I literally spent 15 years of my life building an identity in the pursuit, the obsessive pursuit of getting to the point that God will find me worthy to appear in my bedroom and come and say, Zane, I know your name, just like he told Moses. Moment of silence. I did it that way until I got to the point of exhaustion. That caused me, well, today, that has benefited the International Institute of Pneumatology because it caused me to study at least 15 to 20 different fields to know it well, to begin to be able to understand life, to understand relationship, to understand God, to understand the Bible. And so at the Institute, that library now benefits us. However, it was not a life of peace. Now, you all may not, for some of you hearing me, you may not have done the same as methodically as I did it. But you were pursuing your validation, because that's what I was doing, pursuing my emotional, well, at first, my emotional validation, but really my moral validation, and even my validation of identity. How many of us here can relate to that? Type in the comment section. Does that sound familiar? You're always pursuing it. You're always trying to do the right thing. You're going to church. You're following the rules. You're doing all of this to try to be validated. This is the dynamic that we have been taught in our westernized culture, holy siblings, that has been responsible, 100% responsible for your unhappiness, for your mental health issues, and for a dysfunctional relationship that does not actually validate you enough that you can lay hands on the sick confidently and see manifestation. Even when you're laying hands, you're looking at if it manifests to see if God validates you. Even you're using spiritual manifestation, the same thing that Jesus was tempted on in the wilderness and withstood the devil on. We have been using to try to validate as a tool of validation to say that, well, God loves me. Right? So now that we have identified that, is everybody clear? Type clear. Laboring for love. That is exactly what it is. We're taught to labor for love. Now, what exactly is a relationship? Because we have to understand what this new covenant is. A covenant, so therefore, the first thing we need to identify here is if you're functioning in a new covenant, and a covenant is a contract, and a contract is a relationship, do you now realize that you have not been living in the new covenant? It might sound harsh, but it needs to be identified. Do you now realize that you have not been living in the new relationship? You may have been living in the obsession, but you're definitely using the name of Jesus. But we were not living. I know for certain from where I realized, I came to the astounding realization that we have not been living in the relationship. We have been pursuing a relationship with the name of Jesus, but not living from the relationship in the name of Jesus. If that makes sense, type sense. All right. So how many here wants to get this ball rolling? We need to know what this thing is. What is this? What is relationship therefore? Right? It'll be wicked of me to end the session here right now and leave you in a quandary for the next 7 days. So let's start with covenant. Now, all we're doing here is looking at what this word means in a dictionary. We didn't even start the Bible yet. You just look at dictionary, English dictionary. Covenant, a formal and serious agreement or promise. Look at the word agreement here, right? Formal written agreement between two or more people, businesses, or countries, etc. A usual formal, solemn, and binding agreement. A binding agreement, which is a compact. A compact here, of course, excuse me. A compact here, of course, is in the context of law, an agreement or covenant between two or more parties. Everybody seen that? Right? You can also have a covenant is a written agreement or promise. Does this word sound familiar in the Bible? Promise. Usually under seal between two or more parties, especially for the performance of some action. Right? Notice that we have agreement and we have promise. But very commonly here, what we have is an agreement. Now, a covenant is also a contract. Watch this. A contract, a binding agreement between two or more persons or parties. Right? Contract. Right? To establish a marriage formally. Contract. So if we were using the obsessive dynamic that we were using, some of us get married, and when we get married, we end up changing the dynamic of the relationship from contract to the pursuit of validation. Right? Let me see. Let's put up some of the simpler definitions here. Right? A contract is an agreement. Right? Well, let's not use the killing of the person for money, right? A legal agreement between people. Right? A legal agreement. A written document that shows the terms and conditions of a legal agreement. So now let's look at the meaning of the word agreement, because a covenant is an agreement. An agreement here. Now, this is all, let's look at the legal definitions. Right? Notice agreement is an arrangement or contract here. So contract is being used for agreement also. Right? Legal definition. An agreement is, here we have unity of opinion, understanding, or intent. The mutual assent of contracting parties to the same terms. The mutual assent of the contracting parties to the same terms. Right? An expression as a settlement, covenant, or contract, all one and the same, of the intent or willingness of two or more parties to bind at least one to terms, usually determined by negotiation. Right. So this is a contract, this is an agreement. So now let's break down what an agreement is in its construct. An agreement is basically where two or more parties come together expressing their respective terms and conditions. And where these two parties come to the table, so let's say Robin, Holy Sister Robin, she comes to the table and she represents her company. Let's say her company is Robin and Associates. Robin and Associates come to the table, and Holy Sister Shelley, she comes and she has Divine Food and Associates. And they come to the table to make an agreement. The agreement is actually a connection, which is where this word comes in here now. Watch this. A relationship, right? Which is a connection that you're forming. Now, this is why most people are confused also in our culture, because you see relationship and they think romantic or sexual friendship, which is why people sleep with each other so quickly, because they understand that that is where the relationship starts, because it is under relationship in the dictionary here. But as I showed you all, it falls on the definition of obsession, attachment, sorry. So a relationship here basically would be where, let's say, Robin and Associates and Shelley and Associates, I'm just using business terms so you can see what this looks like practically. The desire to connect with each other, the desire to come into relationship. And Robin and Associates has terms and conditions that they present on the table, a list of terms and conditions that they need to be, let's say, content in this connection. And Divine Foods and Associates approaches and they present their terms and conditions that actually they require for their company to feel content. On this table, Robin and Associates will read the terms and conditions of Divine Food and Associates, and Divine Food and Associates would read the terms and conditions. That Robin and Associates presented. After reading the terms and conditions, if it is agreeable, they say, yes, we can agree to these terms and conditions. And once they agree to the terms and conditions, they may have a document, they shake hands, and they have a document, and they sign to the agreement to come into relationship. What is the relationship? That Robin and Associates agrees with the terms and conditions of Divine Food and Associates. Divine Food and Associates agrees with the terms and conditions of Robin and Associates, and now Divine Food and Associates is technically agreeing to take on the responsibilities determined by the terms and conditions of Robin and Associates, and mutually Robin and Associates are agreeing to take on the responsibilities of Divine Food that is actually outlined in the terms and conditions of Divine Foods and Associates. At that moment, they sign. Once they sign, the signature is an agreement that we have decided to come into relationship, and now both parties have mutual responsibilities to each other and to the relationship to make sure that the relationship runs or remains functional. Does this make sense so far? This is the agreement of relationship. Now I'm just using business here so you can see what it looks like, and then we're going to take it to relationship here, and then I'm going to go into the Bible and show you where this is. Does that make sense to everybody so far? If that makes sense, type sense. Now it sounds legal, right? It sounds very business-like. But let's take it and we relate it to your relationships. Now, in this business relationship, how does Robin and Associates show that Robin and Associates love Divine Foods and Associates? Write it in the comments or unmute if you feel more comfortable speaking. In this relationship, how does Robin and Associates show love to Divine Food and Associates? Honoring relationship, yes, honoring it. And how you do that? Yes, by keeping to the terms of the agreement. By keeping the agreement. All right. Right? Okay. Now, how if Divine Food and Associates just decide they don't want to keep the agreement? If Divine Food and Associates decide not to keep the terms and conditions that Robin and Associates presented to them, that Divine Foods and Associates agreed to keep, how would Robin and Associates interpret the action of Divine Food and Associates for not keeping the agreement? Would it be love or would it be hate? It'll be hate. So keeping the agreement will be considered love. Not keeping the agreement, especially if Robin and Associates decide to bring to their attention that what you agreed to is not being sustained, and Robin and Divine Food and Associates choose to ignore what Robin and Associates says, that will be considered hate. How many understand that? If you understand that, say aye. Everybody responding. If you understand that, say aye. Right? Love, keeping the agreement, not keeping the agreement with arrogance is hate. Your hate, divine food and associates would be hate, would actually demonstrating hate. So basically, showing indifference to the agreement is interpreted as hate in this in this relationship. Yeah. So I've seen a few eyes. Everybody else, I need everybody responding because I don't want anybody to be lost. Aye, all right. Aye, all right. Nice. Now, therefore, the relationship, therefore, can we then agree that love can be defined then? And not in our westernized culture where everybody says love can't be defined. It's so huge. It's so deep. Can love then be defined? Yes, it can. The Bible defines it over and over, but nobody pays attention because of the obsessive dynamic that they apply to relationship with God and trying to find it in the Bible. So love then can be defined. If you love the person, keep your agreement. If Robin and Associates loves divine food and associates, Robin and Associates simply keep the agreement. And divine food and associates, love is keeping the agreement. Exactly. Hate is showing indifference to the agreement. Now, let's go look at this in the Bible. Let's go to Bible Gateway, right? Let me show you something, See, let's go to Exodus 34 and let's read. Wait, Exodus 34, 24. That is when God defines his name. Let's go to Exodus 24. Now let us read. I'm going to read it in the Amplified Bible so that we can keep context here, right? Then Elohim said to Moses, come up to Yahweh, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, Aaron's older sons, and 70 of Israel's elders, and you shall worship at a safe distance. Moses alone shall approach Yahweh, or the Lord. So just for the sake of this session here, I'll say the Lord, right? But the others shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him. Then Moses came and told the people everything that the Lord had said and all the ordinances. What are you hearing here? Moses is communicating everything that the Lord had said and all the ordinances. And all the people answered with one voice, everything the Lord has said we will do. Is this not an agreement taking place here? What literally took place was that God gave Moses the covenant. Israel was supposed to review the covenant, the elders, specifically the elders. They were supposed to review the covenant, review God's side of the covenant and Israel's side of the covenant. And if they agreed with the covenant, then the covenant then God would actually start the relationship. Just like Robin and Associates and Divine Food and Associates, they will agree. And when they agree, they will ratify the relationship. Look at it right here. Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. Then he got up early in the morning and built an altar for worship at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars, memorial stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in large basins, and the other half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it aloud to the people. Communication of the agreement. And they said, everything that the Lord has said, we will do, and we will be obedient. Agreement to the proposition. So Moses took the blood which had been placed in the large basins and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. Let's change covenant and put contract. Behold, the blood of the contract which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all of these words. Let's now put agreement. Behold, the blood of the agreement which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. Is everybody seeing clearly that this is an agreement that was mutually stepped into? This is the old covenant we're talking about. Yes or no? Is everybody seeing that this is an agreement that Israel and God mutually stepped into with each other? Yes or no? And once there was an agreement, then blood ratified the agreement and began the relationship. Is everybody seeing that? Yes or no? Type in the comments. Whether you're on Facebook or in Zoom, yes or no? It was all of God's terms, the people agreed. Now, it wasn't all of God's terms. It was actually God outlined terms for Israel, which would have been Israel's word or promises to God. And then God outlined his terms, which would have been God's promises to Israel. Now, when the Bible was translated, it was the translators themselves who took Israel's side of the covenant and call it commandments, and God's side of the promise, God's side of the covenant, and call it God's promises. But in the actual original language, it just says Israel's words and God's words, meaning Israel's promises and God's promises. Is that making sense? So Israel had to read it, and once they agreed to it, then when they agreed to it, then the covenant or the relationship began. Is everybody seeing that this is an actual agreement, type agreement? Right? Just like Robin and Associates and Divine Food and Associates, this is now Yahweh and Israel. Agreement. And in this agreement, we have responsibilities. So how many of us have heard God say, if you love me, keep my commandments. If Divine Food and Associates loves Robin and Associates, keep your agreement, keep your promises, keep your commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments. And when Israel showed hate to God, God said, you hate me. Why? Because they showed indifference. So let's look at this. Now, most of you probably asking, no. You have a burning desire to know what the new covenant is. That's right. If you love me, look at it. Look at, even Jesus says this here. If you really love me, you will keep and obey my commandments. Why? Because to be with Jesus is via an agreement. Right? Let's look at Old Covenants. Keep my right? Look at this, Exodus 26. But showing graciousness and steadfast love and kindness to thousands of generations of those who love me. Let's highlight that here. Those who love me and keep my commandments. That's a couplet. You love me, keep my commandments. That's a parallel. Is everybody seeing that? But showing graciousness and loving kindness of thought and generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. The Bible defines love as keeping your promises in the agreement. If we take out commandments, because it's the translators that call it, King James translators that call it commandments, we just put promises. In other words, if you love me, keep your promises. If you love me, keep your word. Which is why God is so faithful in the Bible, because he demonstrates his love by faithfulness to his word. He keeps his promises. And some of us might be saying, well, that might be like that. What about the other way around? Let's look at hate me. Right? You shall not worship this. You shall not worship them nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. See why God is said to be a jealous God? Because once you're showing indifferent to the covenant, now jealousy is that you're holding back what you agreed. You have come into a contract, and God becomes jealous because you're keeping what you're promised from him, whilst he is giving what he has promised. Right? A jealous God demanding what is rightfully and uniquely mine, visiting the iniquity, the sin they give to the fathers and the children. That is the calling the children to account for the sins of their fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. Notice it does not say calling the iniquity to the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation, full stop. The condition is only the children who hate me, which means they're not keeping the covenant. They're showing indifference to the contract. So the whole idea of generational curses that we have in our culture is misguided. Because it's only if you abandon the contract or you're showing indifference to your contract would you inherit the sin of your father who also showed indifference to the contract. In arrogance. Not that you made a mistake, you show indifference to it. So, is everybody seeing that the old covenant is a contract, a relationship that has promises of God and promises of Israel? If you're seeing that type relationship, I need everybody responding here, and we'll wrap up on this note. So I hate to actually keep you in more suspense for the new covenant, but I need to lay the foundation so that you understand it completely. Right? So today, what we want to actually identify here is that the old covenant was an actual agreement or contract. So question, can you take up the Bible and apply it to all of humanity and judge all of humanity by it? Yes or no? No, you cannot. Because not everybody came into this contract. Therefore, they have no blame in the eyes of God. They have zero blame. Whilst I'm going to be very blunt here, whilst our modern day Christian community is judging the world, the Bible and God does not judge the world because they did not agree to anything. They still are outside there without knowledge that there is a contract, without knowledge that they can come into relationship with God. So is the Bible a book of divine commandments for all of humanity? Yes or no? No, it is not. And just as the old contract has an agreement, so does the new contract. And this, unfortunately, is what westernized Christian community has not been taught. So I think we can actually wind down here and actually come to the conclusion that how many of us can actually say that tonight you've just come to realization that you have not been living your life with an actual understanding of relationship. You are pursuing it, but you weren't actually having relationship. And so wait, before I wind it up, I showed you it in the Bible. There's no related to actual relationship between husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, friends, family. In this context, a relationship, therefore, is a connection that you have with your significant other or your friend, family relationships via a mutual agreement. What are called, so let's take the whole idea of Robin and Associates and Divine Food and Associates and apply it to an actual relationship. What we call connection in this example of Robin and Associates and Divine Food and Associates is also called connection in our social culture. What we call relationship definitely is not called relationship in our culture. And what we call terms and conditions in our culture is actually unheard of. What we call terms and conditions in the context of relationship in the social arena is actually what we should call our expectations in the relationship. Therefore, an actual relationship with someone requires that you sit with them with the intention of forming a connection, and both parties communicate their expectations explicitly so that each party has the fair chance of actually coming to an understanding as to what one's expectations are. And if it is not very agreeable, then a conversation can take place to come to a more feasible agreement. But once the expectations can be agreed upon, then the decision to enter a relationship requires that you now acknowledge that you're in a relationship, and whatever expectations you heard from the other person, you take on those expectations as your promises so that there is mutual responsibility to the relationship. Does that make sense? Now, this might sound as though it's regimented, but believe it or not, research at the International Institute of Pneumatology indicates that just as God is self-existent, Yeshua being resurrected, every person on this planet received the breath of Yeshua in them. And therefore, every person's spirit is self-existent in nature. And if it is self-existent in nature, every person's spirit is therefore self-determining in nature. And to be self-determining means that to have a relationship with a self-determining being, the only way to actually have a relationship with a self-determining being is to inspire the nature of that being, to inspire the self-determination of that being. And the only way to do that, the most functional way to mutually inspire the spirits of both parties, would be to have a conversation where expectations are expressed. And there is mutual responsibility to the relationship where both parties take on each other's expectations as their promises, once they are agreeable, of course, and there we have a relationship. The research at the International Institute of Pneumatology also identifies that every single person listening to this and who is listening to this, every single person on the planet, on Earth, has 5 emotions that are coming from their self-existing energy. And those 5 emotions, when it comes to relationships and marriages, we must have agreements to connect agape, which should be in your Christ covenant, that should be established. You have to connect your friendship emotion, your romantic emotion, your sexual emotion, and your companionship emotion. These are 5 emotions that come out of your spirit that you have to actually understand that is present and connect them to have an actual functional marriage, functional relationship, functional connections. Outside of relationship and marriage, it may just be friendship, which is something that you can connect very easily. But when it comes to two man and woman coming together to have relationship, it requires that these 5 emotions actually connect by means of agreement. It is because of the lack of the absence of this dynamic that many of us find ourselves in relationships and marriages and are unfulfilled friendship in the connection, unfulfilled agape because of difference in definition, unfulfilled romantic connection, unfulfilled sexual relationships, and unfulfilled companionships. So, in conclusion, holy siblings, ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to give deep thought to this. And at this point, I will pause and open up the floor for any. What are your takeaways from today? How has this impacted you? And yeah, let's hear from you. What are your takeaways and how has this understanding, orientation impacted your mind and heart tonight? Anybody? No, we still haven't hit the new covenants. We will do that next week. All right, for me to hit the new covenant, that'll probably be our next hour. I don't want to exhaust the group here. Plus, it's a bit late now. So I hate leaving suspense, but we are coming. But this here is actually instrumental for you to understand the new covenant. Next week, what I will do is that I will then show you the dynamic of relationship that we've been applying to God via charts, and what the new covenant, what the old covenant is, how it was structured, how you came into the covenant. And then I will introduce you into the new covenant so you can understand explicitly, with explicit clarity, what a new covenant is and actually begin to function in it. Right? It'll be definitely a different experience. Right? So we did a great foundation to go forward. Yes, I trust that I have. So let's hear it, guys. Would you all feel free to unmute and just give some feedback? What we did tonight was actually identify cultural understanding of relationship to actual understanding of relationship. Then we took it to the Bible and then identified what a relationship is supposed to look like with spiritual intelligence. Any takeaways? Will next week be on Thursday? On Thursday, Holy Sister. Any takeaways? Have I saturated you all? Yeah. So a little plenty to digest right now. I know it's a little bit compact. All right. Well, I guess no comments.
Zane?
Uh-huh. What is this?
Yeah, the thing that's really hitting me is love can be defined as keeping the agreement. And it seems like this last week I've been, as I see promises, I see them now as God signed the agreement, like it's a done deal.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to beg him and hope he loves me so that he will fulfill this. It weighs first when you were talking about it being an agreement, I thought, no, love is so good. It's so, don't go legal, don't go business, but yet it has to. Because
it must.
It must. And that gives so much solid, it gives peace.
Because does give peace.
It's done. And so I'm seeing things so much more solid.
And not only that, by the presence of the agreement, that is what actually inspires all the emotions in a safe environment.
Oh, I love that. Could you say that one more time? I'm gonna write it down. Seriously, that's exactly what I've been trying to. Yeah, I just needed that sentence. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
So the agreement is what is the environment, is the safe environment and safe atmosphere that is created that inspires all the emotions of love that we want to experience and bask in without any threat of danger.
That's so good.
That's why the covenant exists. So with the agreements, usually with both parties keeping, this is exactly what happens. And we can explain this now because of 40,000 hours of experiment and actually putting this to actual function. Once the agreement is set and both parties keep their promises, the keeping of the promises establishes trustworthiness. The keeping of the promises also establishes a reference point for common understanding of integrity. With the establishment of integrity and persons keeping their promises over time, trustworthiness is established, and that creates the atmosphere of delight that gives birth to intimacy. It gives birth to intimacy, and the atmosphere is secure so that intimacy can actually be born and develop and bloom and grow into a culture of intimacy, where all of this emotions and love is now within the safe environment of the garden. Does that make sense?
Oh.
You see how much believers have been robbed of?
Yes.
And many of us, this is what God has actually designed for you through the name. The name in particular is actually what makes this possible. Contract possible. The contract creates your garden. The garden then is secure. Because once you're in a relationship and the person is keeping, see, one of the things that we've also been taught is trustworthiness. This is a cultural understanding of trustworthiness. Most persons have been taught that trustworthiness is actually sharing intimate details with others. When they do it, they feel that they can trust the person. That is not the definition of trustworthiness. Trustworthiness is defined as consistent reliability over time. So when you have a contract or an agreement and expectations are agreed upon, taken on as promises, and is consistently kept, it creates an environment of trustworthiness where you can trust, and therefore it inspires the emotions of love and connection and intimacy, and it thrives so that it can move from the position of just being stimulated as an event, and it becomes a culture in the relationship. It becomes something that you can bask in, you can grow in. And all of these 5 emotions in the relationship now becomes a culture, a way of life in intimacy. Believers do not know what they have been robbed from, and it's beautiful. So your contract with God is actually what gives you that sense of trustworthiness with God, that God shows consistency with his promises, that causes you to rest in him, and then you fall in love with him. Just like you'll fall in love with your spouse because they are reliable. They will not misuse you, abuse you, nor do they break trust, so that the intimacy and the emotions of love can thrive and become the garden of delight. Hello?
I'm writing all this down.
Okay.
It's just so true, rather than always being on eggshells and
Yes,
wondering
ma'am.
and
Yes,
trying to
ma'am.
get validation, and to try harder and harder, because I don't know, and all the insecurity and all that is just, love can't thrive. You
No,
can't
it
relax.
cannot. No,
You
you
can't.
can't.
You literally can't.
You
And
cannot. You are always trying, you are always finding yourself in a position where you do not know when your heart will be pierced.
yep.
And you're always trying to defend the sanctity of your heart. Covenant in the Bible creates the Garden of Eden. It is the foundation of the garden.
And it's such a solid foundation compared to just say God loves me,
Exactly.
thinking it's an emotion, and that he thinks
Exactly.
he has my name on his refrigerator, or some of those comments I've heard. I mean, this is
Right.
a contract.
It is a contract.
And it
Well,
goes back to,
technically,
go ahead.
after knowing your contract, he does have your name on his refrigerator.
Right. But that's the bonus. That's not going every day to look at the refrigerator to see if your name's there.
Exactly.
And hoping. It's like, it's there. It's gonna be. Yeah. But that goes back to Curry Blake saying the truth is God's word. End of story.
Yes.
And Keturah said, full stop.
Exactly.
We've got it. The agreement done, signed, done.
Exactly. See, this is where I must most confidently assert that the foundation of walking in God has to be covenant, or else you will be very shaky with someone who is very, very, very loyal. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
That covenant is actually what validates you, so that you can walk in power without second guessing it. This is actually something that should impact marriages in the 5 emotions, to bring the 5 emotions under contract, under agreement. Most believers have not experienced what a marriage is supposed to be like, because the relationship dynamic that is taught is one where they're pursuing a relationship, pursuing a connection, pursuing emotional validation, pursuing sexual validation, pursuing validation as a companion, pursuing validation as a friend. They're pursuing it instead of actually having a relationship and basking and enjoying their relationship, enjoying the security of the atmosphere of agreement. So I trust that this actually gives everybody something to sit down and think about, because your covenant solidifies everything for you to live in love, and also validates you to walk in power
And in peace.
And in peace, knowing that God has high integrity to what he said, to his promises.
Wow, thank you.
You're very welcome on this stuff. right. So any other thoughts for Sister Robin?
No, this is so good.
Okay. All right. So any other thoughts? Anybody else? Everybody's quiet. Like this has to be. I hope that this is deep thinking mode, and not that Zane has just confused my Christianity, and I don't know what to do from here. All right, so well, I guess I can wrap it up here then. So this then brings me to the end of our session here tonight. I do encourage you to review the session. All of these sessions, we will eventually take them and make them MP3s, and it will be available on our podcast channel. That is Zane Keikituro International Institute of Pneumatology Podcast Live. Right? If you have not followed us on your Apple Podcast or on your podcast players on your respective phones, both on iPhone and Android, look for Zane. You can even find us on Google Podcasts. Zane Keikituro, the name of the institute, the full name of the institute, Podcast Live. We will actually post these sessions there, because these are things that believers need to know as to why they are so unstable and why they even struggle with integrity, because they're not accustomed with a construct that is based on a life of integrity and trusting God's integrity. So they're actually in the perspective of pursuing God's validation every single day. So that brings us to the end of our session here today. I trust that it has been insightful. I trust that it actually gives you context and helps you identify what you may have been living in and what you need to actually stop living in, so that you can actually have functional relationships, not only beginning with God, and also to have functional relationships in romantic areas, marriage, friends, family. This is actually what has been given to you in the name. The name is actually what defines all of this. Without the name, you cannot understand this. It is the name, the most valuable rediscovery that we've had at the International Institute of Pneumatology, is the name, and how the priests of old understood the name, and how even Yeshua lives through the name as a principle of functionality and a principle of logic. All right, so on that note, I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your time with me, and thank you also for your patience with regards to the postponement from Wednesday to today, and even the postponement to a further hour. We will resume next week, Thursday at 8 p.m. EST, with most likely the final component. I hope I can actually let me not make that promise. This might turn out to be a 4-part series, because next week I'll actually have to break down the covenants so that you can see what are the components of the covenant, so that you can actually now understand the new covenant in the way that you should, and then finally walk in it with the most security that you'll ever experience in your life. It is actually what is responsible for us with regards to how we manifest power in creation, as well as even in daily life. All right, so see you all next week. Blessings and much love. Have a pleasant night and a ruminating week. Looking forward to next Thursday.
Night, everybody.
Good night.